think we can go ahead and get started and then just continue to let people in as they pop onto the Zoom. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your Saturday once again to join us for our fourth session here in the Fall 2024 Board of Governors series. Today, we'll be covering human resources, management and leadership, and business. So human resources is roughly 12% of the test. Management and leadership's about 13%, and business accounts for about 8%. So with me today is Rick Narad, Grace St. Clair, and I am Ryan DeGive. And we also have Mary Lassard from our Seoul sister chapter. So one quick follow-up we wanted to go over. Rick, did you want to mention the matrices that we had sent out?
Yeah, I do. We sent out with the email earlier this week an example of matrices that are a good technique for pulling the information together. I just want to make sure people didn't think that was all you need. It was a starting point example. So we sent out two. One was the financial ratios, and the other was the laws. And using the laws as an example, as you figured out a couple of weeks ago, there's a lot of laws that you ought to at least be familiar with what law does which. So the matrix is one way of kind of setting up a scaffold for you to think about, so you can put them into different groupings and then list out just one or two sentences that'll remind you of what that law is, or vice versa. If someone asks you what does this, you can remember what law it is. So what we sent you is not the be all and end all of these. It's a starting point just as an example for you.
Thanks, Rick. So we will jump into our first topic, which will be human resources. Again, please feel free to drop your answers into the chat. We love when everyone's engaged and kind of playing along with us. So please feel free to enter your thoughts as well as your answers into the chat as we go along. So I'd like to introduce Grace St. Clair. She has over 15 years of experience in compliance. She's a professor at Cal State East Bay in the MSHCA program, and she's currently in law school. Welcome, Grace. I will hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. And thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to go over the human resource portion. I will say it's not my expertise, human resources, but working within compliance, of course, I'm always in contact with human resources for various reasons, we'll say. So first, I'm not going to go word for word over this, but just a little bit, human resources laws and regulations will be covered, recruitment and retention approaches and techniques, also knowledge of performance management systems, knowledge of employee motivation and development principles and techniques, and knowledge of compensation and benefits practices as well. Going on, also, there's employee safety, security, and health issues such as OSHA, conflict resolution, potential impacts and consequences of human resources and decision-making, which includes operations, finance, healthcare, and quality of care, labor relations practices, job design, and succession planning models. So we will go over these questions. I believe there's about 8 questions. And so I will start off and we'll see how we do. So the first question here is, which of the following is typically performed during a background check? So again, looking at some of these answers, would it be A, verification of personal finances? My first instinct is no for that one. Involvement in religious or political activities. I don't think that would really fall into that. Previous employment or education claims, possibly that one, or prior performance evaluations. I don't believe so for the performance evaluations. I know sometimes during interviews, I've known that people will bring their evaluations, maybe to show some information, but I don't believe it's something that's typically performed during background check. So I know there's some, I saw the chat a little bit. We got a couple C's there. So that's what I would go with, the previous employment or education claims. I think it's important. Obviously, they want to look at what you've done in the past, and if you have certain education or they're requiring education, you maybe they're requiring a bachelor's or a master's or something like that. They may want to make sure that that is valid. So let's see what the answer, and it is C. Good. Okay. For number 2, the primary purpose of well-developed performance appraisal system is to A, compare employees across organization. Not sure about that one. Provide employees with developmental feedback and guidance. I would like that as an employee. Ensure employees understand the job they are supposed to be doing. Okay. And I think it's important to make sure that employee has, what their job, know what they're supposed to do actually. Determine how well management engages employees. So looking at the chat, a lot of B's. And I would go with B as well. I think it's important to get that feedback and guidance and performance appraisals. Let's see. Maybe it is B. All right.
Mary, can I jump in?
Yes, yes.
The reason I eliminated A was that comparing employees sometimes happens in a performance appraisal, but it's a technique, it's not the purpose.
Mm.
So that's why I threw that one out immediately.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay, number 3. So with growing frequency, employees who have been dismissed are resorting to lawsuits for redress. In such cases, the court may find in favor of the plaintiff if the employer dismissed that plaintiff. So A is for cause, but without using progressive discipline. B is without cause. C is before the end of the plaintiff's probationary period, and D for union organizing activities. So this is an interesting question. I mean, my first thought is without cause, but again, it's got a lot of words in this question, in the question. So I'm going to go without cause. It looks like we got a D in there for union organizing activities. Let's see what the answer is, because the one's and it is B. Okay, without cause. All
I think
right.
the one that got me, just to jump in,
Yes.
looking at A, I'm like, okay, it's for a cause, but they always tell you to go through progressive discipline with employees to make sure you're documenting, you're going through the steps. But I think that keyword is for cause, that there's a reason behind, the termination that justifies the termination, even though you haven't done progressive discipline. So I think that one was the one that initially threw me on this question. But that's how I kind of worked through it to come up with the same answer you did.
You're right. It's
Yep.
also situational. I mean, if an operating room nurse comes in totally drunk, there's no progressive discipline needed. That's it
Yeah.
right there, I hope.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would be required. The one that I was hung up on is union organizing activities, because we've seen that recently with Starbucks, where people have been fired for activities and have sued.
Oh, yeah. That's true. Yeah, this question got me a little bit. So, all right, number 4. So, which of the following would be considered the most effective approach to preventing the need for employee disciplinary action? So, the word "the most" is kind of sticking out at me. So, A, having an accurate job description. B, having an employee orientation program, which it's important. C, implementing a performance-based compensation system. I mean, I think that's good, but I don't know if it would be the most effective approach. D, giving managers a small span of control. I would not think of D. Let's see. So I think the most effective for preventing the need for employee disciplinary action, I'm leaning towards A. I think it's important to have that accurate job description so the employee really knows what they need to do within their job. And it looks like looking at we got some D's, maybe some B's. So let's see what it is. I may go with either the job description and or the employee orientation program. I think that's important because then they really, get to sit down with somebody and know. But also I think if we're looking at the most, I would say the first step would be to have that job description, have employees sign off on it, and really have, an opportunity for them to ask any questions. So A, oh, it is A, good. All right. So number 5, which activity should precede the beginning of a recruitment process for a new employee? So A, obtaining information from employees in similar position to assess the validity of the job description. Okay. B, assessing the cost of various forms of recruitment. C, making a decision whether to emphasize internal or external recruitment. Or D, conducting a job analysis. Let's see, we've got a couple. An A, M, or D in there as well. So which activity should precede the beginning of a recruitment process for an employee? So I think if it's a beginning process, I'm leaning towards possibly, we definitely want to conduct a job analysis. I think I would go leaning towards D. Let's see what the answer is here. Looks like we got a lot of D's in the chat. And it is D. So I think that's important just to really be able to look at what's needed and look at that job and have a good comprehensive analysis of it. Okay, so let's go to 6. The evaluation of senior management is best administered. There's A, when criteria are established and known to both parties. B, on a scheduled periodic basis. C, after consultation with the executive committee of the board. Or D, in conjunction with a salary adjustment. This one, let's see. Evaluation of senior management is best administered. I'm thinking, let's see what anybody in the chat here says. We got a B. B's in there.
Yeah, looks like we got a few B's.
I'm not sure on a schedule. I think that's important. To look at a period, basis, have a schedule. But I also think when criteria are established and known to both parties is really important. That senior management really knows what that criteria is.
Can I take a shot at this?
Yes.
I'm going to try my true false thing. So when criteria established and known to both parties, that makes sense. So I'm going to put that as true. On a scheduled periodic basis, well, look back at the question. It's senior management. So usually we think of annual reviews, but with senior management, you may be doing it differently. It may be because of a crisis or something unexpected or whatever. So I would say with senior, it's probably less likely scheduled periodic, although you probably still want it, at least once a year. After consultation with the executive committee seems like just a distractor. So who's doing the evaluation of senior management? Well, At the top level, it's going to be the CEO, and above the CEO or evaluating the CEO, it's the board. So yeah, executive committee, probably not. In conjunction with the salary adjustment goes back to me kind of like B, that it may be an annual review or it may not be. Again, we're talking senior management, so contractually they may not have a annual adjustment. So I like A. I don't like B and D for the same reason. I think C is incorrect. So that's why I would get to A. Even if I didn't know the answer, I could probably eliminate three of them.
Okay. I like it. Let's see what it is. And it is A.
And I'm really relieved because after I went through all that, it'd be wrong.
No, I like that true false way to do that too. All right, let's see. So question 7. Let's see. The critical incidence technique of employee performance appraisal requires raters to A, select statements that fit the performance characteristics of individuals. B, select the highest and lowest performing employee in a work unit. I would just reading that question, I would say no to B. C, record the degree to which specified behaviors are performed. D, record behaviors of employees that are related to both good and poor performance. Just looking at these, I think it's A, select statements that fit the performance characteristics of individuals. I don't see myself doing that in a critical incidence technique. Or like I said, I wouldn't do the B, looking at the highest and lowest performing employee in a work unit. I think the only time I would think to look at that is just to see if somebody's really performing low and somebody's really performing high, maybe look at why, or what that high performing employee is doing differently. Record the degree to which specified behaviors are performed. Not sure about that one. I would probably stick more to record behaviors of employees that are related to both good and poor performance. D, and we have a D. We have a D in there. Let's see what the answer is. And it is D. Okay. All right. So let's go to the last question. So according to Herzberg's hygiene and motivators theory of motivation, A, cleanliness of the workplace plays an important role in motivation. So I think that's true. I don't know if it's really part of this theory. C, B, the absence of adequate compensation can be a dissatisfier, but the presence of adequate compensation is not a motivator. Okay. C, employees are motivated by money and factors intrinsic to the job itself. Or D, extrinsic factors are prime motivators. All right. Let's see if anybody wants in the chat. So we got.
It's like we got a C
C,
chat.
yeah. Employees are motivated by money. I mean, though, I think, a lot of folks are motivated. Money's always a good thing. I don't know if it's the most important thing. I think, as an employee myself, I'm always like, yeah, that's great. And of course, wouldn't mind always having more money, but I think being happy in a job itself is important. I would probably stick more with B. The absence of adequate compensation can be a dissatisfier, but the presence of adequate compensation is not a motivator. So again, yes, it can be dissatisfier. You're not getting paid well, but I think it's also not the only motivator out there. Let's see, we got a couple. Any more answers before we go to the?
Just a comment that this is another good area for making a matrix is list out all the organizational leadership theories that you run into particularly all the different motivation and leadership ones, and just come up with a sentence or two that will remind you of what each one is.
Mhm.
You know, because hygiene and cleanliness might, if you didn't know what they are, they might think that was logical, but if you know the theory, you know that's wrong.
Yeah, true. I'm gonna go towards B. Oh, we got a B in there, and it is B. Good. All right. I think is that the end? Yes, the end of the human resources. See if there's any questions.
Questions in the audience or any thoughts from Grace, Rick, Mary?
I think HR is a hard one unless you're in HR, because we've kind of I'm in operations, and especially with employees, we're kind of, well, not kind of, we are trained to always rely on our human resources expertise and experts in that department. So at times I find this a more difficult subject for me because I do rely on the HR experts so often to lead me, keep me in check with these types of decision areas. So I think that's why this tends to be a more challenging subject, unless, like I said, you're an HR person.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, just as a day-to-day manager, you're doing employee reviews, for example,
True, true,
doing
true.
hiring. So it is a topic you do need to know something about. And I agree, if you're not doing it all the time, it's a tough one to remember. Like, I have no idea what all the different appraisal techniques are. I just know there's a ton of them.
Yeah.
Well, and I think just looking at the questions that were on there, we tend to think of HR, hiring, giving compensation, and helping us with, employee disputes, but there's, organizational development, um, everything else behind it. So just looking at those questions and the different theories, just trying to broaden your scope with HR and looking at all the different areas within could probably help you with preparing for the exam.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you, Grace, for going through the human resources section for us. We'll move on to Mary, who's going to be presenting the next few topics for us today. Mary is our sister partner chair with Soul for their member advancement committee. She's also a practice manager of internal medicine at UC San Diego La Jolla campus. She's board certified in healthcare management and a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives. She's also a lecturer at the School of Public Health in San Diego, San Diego State, and she's also a doctor of public health candidate with San Diego
Thank
State
you.
University.
Yes.
Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, everyone. Leadership management. Hopefully, for most of us, this is our bread and butter. So these topics, and I'm not going to read through them, but it is important as you are preparing for the exam to make sure you touch upon and have a general understanding. If there is something, let's say for contingency planning, emergency management response, that's not something that you have had exposure to, depending on your day job, to just familiarize yourself with those topics. And we've already discussed in this group some great resources that are available to broaden your knowledge area. So with that, I'm going to jump right into our sample questions for leadership. So the first question is, the purpose of capital expenditures committee is. Okay, so this is a broad general question. We're looking at capital expenditures and a committee that is making decisions on what the organization is going to use their funds to make large purchases. That's what capital means, large purchases. So let's just walk through, and I I tend to be the approach, like Richard, I'm looking for the wrong answers first to eliminate. So let's just go through A. To oversee appointment of competent medical staff to render capital for service area. Well, appointing medical staff really has nothing to do with the purpose of a capital expenditures committee. So I'm going to right off the bat eliminate A. To appoint an effective governing board based on the wishes of the medical staff. Well, usually capital expenditures, when you're trying to decide, the medical staff is typically a very loud voice and typically the one requesting the capital expenditure. But as far as the purpose of the capital expenditure committee, their general purpose is not based on the wishes of the medical staff. So I'm going to eliminate B. C, to be responsible for evaluating and prioritizing requisitions for new equipment. Well, that's looking pretty good, pretty promising. I think that's a general, purpose to be responsible, that structure of that sentence, and then just what it says, evaluating and prioritizing. That's typically what expenditure committee they're doing. But let's just look at D to ensure that C is looking as the best. To implement stakeholder wishes on the future direction of the organization, the organization should take. Well, that word wishes, I think that's a big warning flag, because depending on your stakeholders, which may change, that's not going to be just the purpose of the capital expenditures committee. The purpose of a committee should not change based on wishes of people that come and go. So I'm feeling very confident that D is not the answer. So I'm going back to C. Can we see the answer, Ryan, aka Vanna? I just dated myself with Wheel of Fortune. C, that's it. Okay, let's move on to the next question. The U.S. healthcare industry is highly diverse, and to address the ongoing challenges of workforce diversity, and this is a very, very hot topic, even, an organization should do the following. So we're looking at something to address ongoing challenges of workforce diversity. That's how I read that question. So A, expand the market share by adding or enhancing services that target a diverse population. Well, we're talking about the workforce. So adding and enhancing services, that's talking about your customer, your patients. So that is not, to me, seeming to be the answer as far as what the question is asking, addressing ongoing challenges of workforce diversity. We're looking at our employees and the diversity of our employees. So let's go on to B. Develop a linkage between the marketplace and the workforce that will enhance diverse recruitment, development, and retaining of employees. Well, that question is looking pretty good because it's just wrapped up in a nice bow, talking about the linkage between the community, where you're going to get employees, and then your workforce, which is what the question is asking about, ongoing challenges of workforce diversity. So I'm going to keep that one open. Let's go down to C. Develop a diversity education tools available both to the workforce and to the community. I mean, maybe the organization could do that, but should they do that? Is that the best answer for addressing ongoing challenges of workforce diversity? I'm not thinking that is going to be the best answer. Okay, D, develop, I got my chat from there. Develop and implement workforce policies and management practices, maximize the talent and productivity of employees with a diverse background. Okay, so in my mind, it's definitely between B and D. So B is nice, but it's talking about linkages between the market and the workforce. that could be something that you do, definitely, but is that the best? And to address ongoing challenges, I love it where it says maximize the talent and productivity of employees with diverse background. I may be wrong on this one, folks, but I am going to go with D as the best answer. What is it, Ryan?
Looks like we have consensus in the chat as well. And it's D.
D. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, that one was a hard one. There were a lot of them that, sometimes these questions, it's just so obvious what the right answer is. And this one, I think, was one of those more challenging that could maybe trip you up. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Whew, how come I'm getting these inch deep questions here? Goodness, a transformational leader we all aspire to adapts and applies evidence-based leadership in their practice, and the application of evidence-based practice in healthcare management is more challenging compared to the clinical practice setting. So this long question is basically stating a comparison between healthcare management leaders, administrative, compared to the clinic, in the clinical practice setting. So that kind of differentiates our industry as for other leaders that may be in the business world. We're leaders, and we are in a setting where the majority of our employees are clinically based and are practicing, our doctors and the staff, in a clinical setting. So let's look at this question, these answers from that perspective. A, the culture in healthcare management is much less professionalized, and I think that term is meaning to like licensed, with much less formal body of knowledge and great diversity among practitioners. That is sort of a comparison, so I'm going to keep that one open. I'm going to go to the next, again, looking for questions I can eliminate. The decision-making in healthcare management is supported by various support systems, such as handbooks and guidelines, making it complicated. That may be true, but it doesn't seem to be comparing, healthcare leadership to maybe leadership in other industries. So I'm thinking to eliminate B. The difference of the context or content of the research evidence from a clinical perspective to management perspective is non-comparable. Well, I don't really think that's true. I mean, you can compare many things, and maybe they're not similar, but you can definitely compare. So non-comparable, I think that's just a diversion question and trying to, take your eye off the ball, because this question has it says in it both evidence-based. So I think that that's just a diversion because it's talking about research evidence, but I don't think that's the right answer for this question about why healthcare management is more challenging. So D, the culture in healthcare management is highly professionalized with a strong formal body of knowledge. Well, again, and this is a kind of a challenge for this question. What do they truly mean by highly professionalized? And when I think of that, I think of licensure. And in healthcare management leaders, we don't have licenses that we have to obtain, whereas doctors, nurses, different people in the clinical practice setting that we are managing do have to have those licensures to do their work. So I'm eliminating D. That brings me back to A, which is compared to practitioners, clinical setting practice. We are less professionalized than our doctors and nurses. And the formal body of knowledge, when you're talking about nurses and doctors, especially when you get into specialized specialties, cardiology, orthopedics, that's very, very formal body of knowledge and a great diversity. So I think we do have a great diversity. You can have healthcare leaders across the board that have a very diverse background of what they bring to the table experience. So I'm going with A, and I'm sorry if I beat this question to death, but I'm really trying to be as analytical about this as possible. Ryan, what's the answer? A. Great. We're right. Okay. Going on to the next question. Yes?
Can I ask a question back on the last one?
Yes, go back,
Um,
Ryan.
that this question has an incredible number of words in the question itself, plus in the options. And so I was trying to narrow it down, and I was wondering, you were focusing, I think, on the leadership differences. And when I tried answering it, I was focusing on specifically evidence-based practice.
Mm. Okay, transform. Good catch. Let me read the question again. I could have got the right answer by evaluating it
I ended up
differently.
with the same answer, but
Yeah, leaders adapt and apply evidence-based leadership in their practice and application of evidence-based practice in healthcare management. So is more challenging compared to, I don't know. I mean, when I think of my physicians and my nurses, they too are practicing and applying evidence-based. So, I think you could look at it from either way.
yeah, maybe
But
it's a tough one with all the words in there to say
it's a hard
what
question by far.
do they want to know? So just
Yeah,
spending some time on the question, making sure you really understand what I'm looking
understand
at.
it. And then the culture in healthcare management. So they're talking about the culture in healthcare management. And so that culture, like you said, transformational leader that adapts and applies evidence-based leadership. Okay. Healthcare management. I just took it as you're comparing healthcare management compared to um, the clinical practice setting and who's in the clinical practice setting. Like my staff, I have one supervisor, clinic supervisor. The rest of my staff that report to me are nurses, LVNs, RNs, medical assistants. So when so they have different. Okay, well, let's go on because I think we don't have all day. As much as I'd like to spend on these questions, you could really ponder almost each question. An effective emergency disaster preparedness plan, which is important for any healthcare organization, very important, includes triaging arrived injured, coordinating with other community resources, and so hours of operation. Well, we're looking for an effective emergency plan. I mean, in an emergency, are you closing down based on your typical hours of operation? No. So I'm going to, off the bat, immediately exclude A. An active command structure. Yes, I definitely think, I mean, we have all different, I work it for a hospital-based system, so this is our bread and butter, depending on maybe you work at an insurance plan or maybe a primary care clinic, in a state of emergency, you may definitely have a plan, but I think this is looking at it from more of you're going to be treating patients, injured, community people, regardless if they're your patient or not. And you definitely, to do that, you need an active command structure. And usually the command structure has certain levels depending on what the emergency is. I mean, the emergency sometimes could be your IS system is hacked. So let's see. Payment for hospital personnel. Yeah, of course, but I don't think that your payment of your personnel, I mean, maybe if they are part of it, you're going to pay them overtime, but I don't think that that really differs with this situation. And D, what's D here? D. Approve. Unfortunately, my chat pop-up is right over the slide. Regulatory approval from CMS. Well, you're going to have that regardless of whether you have an effect. Well, you need an effective emergency disaster plan to be approved by CMS, but we're looking at this question, which is asking for what's missing. So you have your plan includes what to do if people from the community arrive injured, and you're coordinating that with community resources. But who's coordinating? Who's running the plan? It's B, an active command structure. So definitely going with B.
I think everyone kind of jumped on that in the chat. That was the main answer that stuck out to everyone,
Yeah.
and it's B.
So, and Ryan, Grace, you tell me if I'm beating the question to death, because sometimes I have a tendency to do that. Let's go next so we can go through these a little bit quicker. Committees are an important management tool primarily because, so we're looking at committees, management committees, and why do we have them? What is the main reason? They provide a mechanism for reconciling different opinions and facilitating different decisions. I'm liking that, but let's go to B and C and D. They are the only way for providing for intra-staff communications. Well, regardless of what the answer is, typically when an answer has words like only, always, never, it's a red flag that it's not going to be the answer. Let's go to C. So I don't like that answer for that reason. And a primary reason why you have a committee only providing a certain thing, no, that's not, I don't like B regardless. They keep staff up to date on new professional developments. Well, that may be true, but is that the primary reason or the primary, committees? Let's look back at the question. Committees are an important management tool. So having committees, what's the reason? The primary reason we have them? It's not to keep staff up to date on new professional developments. And the last one is, oops, I opened up the chat. The last answer is they ensure self-expression and participation by staff. Well, definitely that's important, but is again that the primary reason? And that D actually supports A, which is the one I'm leaning towards, because it's talking about different opinions, which is self-expression of staff, and they facilitate the decision-making process. So a committee is going to take in different opinions, and that committee is going to hopefully come up with a consensus. So I am going with A as the primary tool or primary reason why we have committees. There you go. Okay. So just before we move on, these questions will have things that are definitely true. And when you come across an answer that is definitely true, take yourself back to the question and kind of dissect that question. What are they looking for? And in the last one, it was the primary reason. So that's kind of that is a very important technique in looking through these questions, because they do have answers that are true, but they don't answer the best or the primary or the main. So let's see, reason. Which one of the following statements is in accordance with the principles of delegation? So again, kind of going back to theory about delegation, why do we do it? What is the principal reason we do delegation? The executive who subscribes to the principle of delegation knows what he or she wants to accomplish and exercises control over the work schedule of subordinates. Well, that's a very specific, honed in answer, talking only really about work schedules of subordinates. So I'm not thinking that that is a principle, which is an overarching kind of theory. An executive explains how or she wants things done, points out how the subordinate's contribution fits into the overall plan. Well, delegation usually, and a principle of it is you give someone sort of a general direction, you delegate them to do it. You're not micromanaging exactly how you want things done when you delegate something to someone to do. Whew. So I'm going to go, I don't think that's a very good answer. Let's go to C. A successful executive gives instructions telling subordinates exactly how and in what sequence things should be done. That is definitely not a principle of delegation, so I am eliminating C. D, in implying the principle of delegation, I like how the question or the answer starts off already. An executive makes relatively few decisions personally and frames orders in broad general terms. Well, I think I kind of basically already said that was a principle of delegation. So I love D, and I'm going with D, Ryan. Whoop, whoop. I hope in the chat. I'm not monitoring the chat, but maybe my co-host here will did
Yeah,
we basically get a
there's,
general consensus
We
of
all
D?
support you.
yeah.
Okay, let's go on to 7. Oh, great. A short question and answer. I love the one one word. Which of the following is not an executive function? So we are looking for the opposite of executive office function. Executive office function control. Maybe they do control things, but maybe not maybe that's not the best thing or the thing that executive office should be doing. Leading, definitely executives lead. They support, definitely support. Represent, they represent the people that they oversee. And so it's A. I'm going with A
We have
because all the other
consensus in the
answers,
chat as well for A. So let's see.
executive office. Yes. That one's a tricky one because a lot of people think like the very top is controlling everything. But when you look at this, that you're trying to pick one that is not like the others, leading, support, representing, those seem all very well meshed together where control, authoritative, and probably not the best thing. So that's why. Good answer. Okay, 8.
I'm not sure that
What?
the one word answers were easy.
Oh, okay. Well, we all here's one that I always hate. Order. Correct order. So all the answers have the same words in different order. It's a brain teaser here. What is the correct order of stages of accomplishing organizational change? So basically, what does an organization do when they want to implement a change? And what are the phases of that change? So here we go. A, identify and plan, do, the PDCA, if you're familiar for change and monitoring change, is what I typically use. So let's see how if this kind of fits in. These answers kind of fit into that theory or structure when you're implementing change. Identifying, planning, implementing, and evaluating. Right off the bat, I love A, but let's see what B, C, and D have to offer. Planning and then identifying. Usually you have to identify the change that you want to make before you can plan how you're going to make that change. So I'm eliminating B. Evaluating, planning, implementing, and identifying. These just seem jumbled. What are you gonna evaluate? You haven't even made the change yet. So evaluating, this one could maybe throw someone off thinking that like they're gonna evaluate the current circumstances before they, but I think the better word is identifying what change you're gonna make. So I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna have that because evaluating is definitely not your first phase of accomplishing, organizing change. D, planning, evaluating, identifying, and implementing. Well, again, planning is the first stage. Like, how do you plan to implement something before you identify what you're implementing? So I'm going back to the initial identifying the change you want to make, planning how you're going to do it, then taking that plan and implementing. And once you've implemented the plan, the change, you are going to evaluate that change. So I'm definitely going with A, sweet spot. We got consensus, Ryan? What's the answer?
We do. Looks like everyone's on board with A, and it's
Yay.
A.
Okay.
Let me throw in a
Ryan or Richard?
technique let me throw in a technique on this one. I hate these also, the ones with the list. They're really confusing to answer. So when I look at the 4 words, I try to say, okay, well, which one of these 4 should go first and which one should go last? And then just for example, evaluating to me has to come at the end, right? Because you evaluate after you've implemented. So I can look quickly and say, wait a minute, only one of these put evaluating at the end. And then
Right.
odds are I can eliminate the others. Same with identifying should come first. There's only one that has that. So that helps me kind of keep straight in my mind which ones, and then I can still double check just to make sure I've got it right, but it helps me narrow them down.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's go on to 9. In the healthcare field, the accountability of management is best measured. So you're looking for the best answer. And so that already off the bat, I'm thinking these answers are going to have things that are definitely true, but we're looking for the best true answer. So let's go. Accountability of management. How do we measure accountability? Balance maintained between service quality and operational efficiency. Ooh, I'm liking that. I'm liking accountability. In healthcare, we often have competing interests, especially between, the bottom line and the quality or the customer service. So in my opinion, we're always balancing those things and holding each other accountable, because you could swing one way, you could provide, premier service, but in doing that, you're maybe not being the most efficient for the bottom line. So B, results shown on the annual expense and income statement. Well, this is one of those answers that, in my opinion, is true. And you, as a manager, you are looking at your, revenue and expense and how you're doing, what is the bottom line. But that's not everything that you're being held accountable for as a manager. So let's go to C. Balance maintained between physician satisfaction and patient needs. Again, that is a true answer in accountability. You are, and I deal with this every day in clinical operations, trying to make your physicians happy, but then also trying to make your patients happy. It is something that you are definitely balancing, but is it the best measure? I would say no. And it's kind of like a measure within the overall accountability structure you want to have for your managers. Degree to which management's needs are met. Well, it's a very inward looking accountability. I don't believe B, C, or D is the best way to measure accountability for management. So I'm going with A, because it talks about quality, service quality, and operational efficiency. What's the answer? Which is the key, the foundation of what we're all trying to do as management? Yes, A. Any additional, Ryan, Richard? Any additional comments on this one? Okay, number 10. I'm hoping we just have 10 questions in this section. The culture climate of an organization affects its recruiting procedure because. So let's see. Culture climate of an organization affects its recruiting procedure. Okay, we're talking about recruitment, and we're talking about basically the culture of the organization and how one impacts the other. So the culture of your organization impacts recruitment because it reduces employee turnover and absenteeism. Could be true. Let's go on to B. Organizations seek applicants whose attitudes, values, and goals are consistent with those of the organization. I really like that answer, because whenever I'm recruiting, that is what I'm looking for. Of course, as an organization, you want to attract staff, attract employees that have consistent attitudes and values and goals. Because if you hire someone that is not consistent with that, you're basically going to end up with end up with the opposite of A, high turnover and absenteeism. Let's go to C. Applicants who cannot support a given culture will be unwilling to work for that organization. I definitely think that's true, but I don't think that, and that's something that you definitely want to avoid when you're recruiting, but I don't think that's the, I don't think that's talking about the applicants. That's kind of like the other way around. If you don't find applicants that support your culture, organization culture. D, applicants look only to organizations that portray a positive culture. Well, I definitely think that that's also true, but going back to the question, we want to know how the organizational culture affects your recruitment. And I think that B, because the question or the answer starts off with the organizations seek applicants. So this is talking about how the organization impacts the recruitment process of recruiting from your applicants. So I'm going with B. I kind of feel like I'm word salad on that one. So if I'm not making sense, just tell me. But I think B. Yes, thank you. Any chime in? It's a hard one to dissect
Two
and to
thoughts.
go
One is
through.
that when you look up at the question, it says organization affects its recruiting. Be careful not to think affects good or affects bad, right?
Oh,
In this
right.
case, I think it affects bad because our biggest problems on diversity is we keep rehiring ourselves. So
Yeah,
he is correct, but I think it's a bad thing about organizations. Um,
right.
I think I just want to comment, Mary, is I think you commented a couple times about taking a long time on these questions, and I think you're doing it perfectly because you've got to go through and really look at these. You can't just jump right into the first answer that looks good. So I like listening to how you've done the analysis.
You like listening to how my mind works. Oh, that's good.
I
That's
think so.
reassuring, Richard.
Demonstrating how your mind should work when you take the test.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
very analytical. Okay, let's go. And you have a lot of time. Oh, Q&A. Yes, you have a lot of time, probably enough time that, and realistically, you could probably go through the exam 2 times. I don't know, Ryan, Richard, but that is my understanding. So you're not being really pressed to zip through the questions before time is up.
Yeah.
So it allows you to think methodically, and with multiple choice tests. I do not like multiple choice tests, but overall, you're usually looking for the wrong answer first and going through that process to find the right answer, then looking for the right answer. I know that seems backwards, but that is the proven strategy for taking multiple choice tests. Okay.
Well, I think to second what Rick said about, listening to you and how you approach the question, that's exactly how you should take the test because you do have that amount of time. You can break each answer down further. So, take advantage of that time. I know nobody wants to sit for 6 hours in front of a computer taking a test, but if it's going to help you pass it on the first try, take your time on it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Let's go to the last section, business. Okay, these are the knowledge areas we've already talked about. How you just want to make sure you're aware, familiar with those knowledge areas, and definitely kind of dissect those knowledge areas that you're covering, each of those in your preparation. Let's see. Let's go on to the first question. Which of the following is an uncontrollable factor in a marketing plan? So let's put on our marketing hat. And when we're developing our marketing plan, what is the element or factor in this question that we cannot control when we're developing that plan? Economic environment, Well, environment, marketing is talking about, your community in which that you serve, and you can't really impact the economy that I know in this day and age, we'd all like to be controlling our economy a little bit better. But I definitely think A, looking like a winner. Our marketing plan, the budget for our marketing plan, definitely a controllable factor. So B is eliminated. Personnel, the people that within the organization that are working on the plan, contributing to the plan, we definitely can control that. D, creativity. This one might be the A and D. Can you control creativity? Maybe. I think you can, in that the plan and how creative it is can be controlled by the people that you bring in to work on that plan. So even though D is a maybe, like, when you think, well, I can't control someone's creativity, but you can control the people that are contributing to the plan and choose the people that are more creative than not. So I am going with A as a definite, like, that's certainly an uncontrollable factor, no question. Yay, A. Whoop, whoop. It's what I wish I could control our economy right now. Okay, number 2, let's go on. The element most critical. So again, right, flag that these answers are going to include right answers, but you're looking for the most critical answer to the successful design and implementation of an executive decision support system. Of course, in a healthcare organization, we're always talking about healthcare organizations. So I'm focusing on what's the most critical. We're talking about design and implementation of a support system that helps us make executive decisions. Okay, I think I understand the question. Now I'm going to jump to the first answer. Availability of software for updating the database. Well, that's certainly important, but is that the most critical? Software updates? I don't know. I always cringe whenever they give us a heads up that they're updating our electronic health records. It's like, no, I just figured out how to manage it. Now you're going to update it, and going to have different screens, different ways of doing things. Yeah, I don't think that's the most critical. Maintaining data confidentiality. Well, again, true, that does contribute, but is that the most critical element? I don't think so. Involvement of top management. Well, we're talking about executive decisions. So who's making in the organization the executive decisions upon which the system will support? Top management. So C is looking perfect. That's looking to be my sweet spot, but let's see what D has to offer. Availability of network computer equipment. Well, yes, definitely important. But when we go back to the question of what is this system going to support, it's going to support executive decision making. And whenever you're looking at a system, you always have to include the users, the primary users of the system, for it to be successful in what you're designing. So I am going with C as the most critical element to the success of a decision-making system, executive decision-making system. Let's go. Yep, it's right. Definitely. And this question could be any system, your primary users. It's definitely a critical element. If you design something and you don't have those users involved, most likely it will fail no matter what you're trying to do. So let's go on to 3. What is a fundamental reason? What is a fundamental reason for joint ventures between healthcare organizations? So you're talking about joint ventures. between two healthcare organizations, and fundamental reason you're looking for the why. Why do healthcare organizations enter joint ventures? Because they are allowed by EMTALA. Well, I don't think EMTALA, we all know what EMTALA is. Well, maybe I make an assumption. EMTALA is uh, something that allows, access, usually referred to in like emergency medicine, of providing life-saving care to patients. So that really doesn't have anything to do with joint ventures. So I'm eliminating that. They are formed, the why, because they offer legal routes to cooperative efforts. I'm liking it. Two healthcare organizations go into a joint venture. Definitely they're cooperating with each other, and a joint venture is a legal partnership. So B is looking very good at this point, but let's do our process of elimination. And that's what it is. Like, don't stop at the first answer that you think is right. Go on to the others and walk through every single answer. They are permitted as a means to share clinical and quality advancements. Well, that is true. Two healthcare organizations, a legal partnership, that you would share clinical and quality advancements. But is that the fundamental reason why healthcare organizations go into joint ventures? Typically not. They are created to lower overhead costs. Well, definitely true. But again, C and D, while they may be reasons why joint ventures are formed, they're not the fundamental, the primary, the basis for going into a joint venture. I think that they are a joint venture is a legal partnership. So and B talks about that legal partnership. So I'm going with B. Right. Because C and D are really talking about those cooperative efforts. So they kind of roll up into B. So
When I
did
think
we get mostly B in the chat,
in the
Ryan?
chat, it was kind of a mix of B and
Oh,
C, and I think it's one of those questions like you highlighted where you're looking for the fundamental reason. Like you're going to have answers that are correct, but what's going to be the most correct for what the question
answer.
is asking?
Yes.
So it's one
I
of those
read, I
Okay.
read
confusing
the,
ones to take some time on, I think.
yeah, I read
Richard?
the also as the two that I wanted to play with in my head. And I eliminated C for two reasons. One is because it is included within B. So if we wanted to cooperate on clinical advancements, it does that, but we may want uh, to cooperate on a building, right? So
Mhm.
B's broader. The other reason I didn't like C was I also didn't like A for this reason. They are allowed, they are permitted, doesn't give you the reason. It just says you can do it, but it doesn't say why,
Yeah, that's a good point.
where B does.
Hmm. Exactly. And D is true too. Like, people go into joint ventures, and cooperate because they don't want to, recreate their own infrastructure when they have another healthcare organization they can partner, and that, economies of scale and things like that, to lower overhead costs. And so, again, I think that D is true, but it's not the fundamental reason, typically, generally. Depending on who they are, why you're going into the joint venture could vary, but you're just looking for that fundamental that would apply to any joint venture. Okay. 4, when contracting for services, an organization typically finds the best value. So again, we're looking at the best answer that has the best value when they do what? So put on our contracting hat for services. That contracting for services could be a number of things. You know, Healthcare organizations have contracts with all kinds of vendors. So what is the best value? in doing so. The organization creates an internal auditor position to oversee the service. While that may be true, that's not giving us a best value, the outcome of contracting for services. You may do that to monitor the value of contracting on an ongoing basis, but that's not the right answer, in my opinion, my perspective. A board member negotiates for discounted services. Usually the board is not, as we talked about governance, they're not involved in direct day-to-day like operations of the organization that they're a board member of. So be easy elimination, in my opinion. The organization allows the prospective supplier to develop the contractual service expectations. Usually that's the other way around. The organization that's contracting with the vendor or supplier is setting those expectations for that vendor of what they expect them to do in their contractual agreement. So see if you just flipped around, organization and supplier, may be true, but not the way it's written. There's competition between several suppliers with proven performance and reputation. Well, that is a good thing, and that's usually something that you usually have competitive bids whenever you're looking for a vendor. That's a good practice, and that may definitely may give you the best value. Competition, capitalism, often gives you the best value. So I am looking at D as the best answer, providing the best value when looking for a supplier or a vendor. Ryan? There we go. I hope that was the consensus. This one I think was easier. There weren't many answers that I thought were like really close, at least this question. But if that's not your expertise, it may be a little bit harder. Common sense I use often with business. Okay, number 5. When data is scarce, and data, I think, quantitative data, the best method of forecasting is to use. Well, let's think of the 2 types of data we have. We have quantitative and qualitative. Usually qualitative meaning, data such as like surveys, things that opinions, that type of thing is qualitative. But I think that I'm interpreting this question when data is scarce, that they're talking about quantitative data, numbers, things like that. What is the best alternative for forecasting? Computer-based simulation methods. Well, that's usually what you're using when you're using quantitative in my, computer-based. So I'm not thinking A is the best alternative method when you're talking about types of data. Time series analysis. I mean, that's a method, but again, when you're doing something like that, you usually have data. Econometric forecasting, in all honesty, I don't even know what that is. But it sounds like the economy, you would need data and numbers. Qualitative techniques. When I think of data, I think of 2 types of data, 2 main types of data, quantitative and qualitative. And my interpretation of the question is referring to when quantitative data, I'm sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background, quantitative data is scarce, the best alternative is qualitative data or qualitative techniques. So I'm going with D, but before we reveal the answer, Richard, you want to chime in?
Oh, I was just going to say, sorry, I interrupted before. Wanted to say that econometrics is the most heavy data-driven number part of economics. So all economics people love numbers,
Numbers,
great
yeah.
people, but the econometric people are the weirdest ones.
Okay, so thank you for enlightening me. Now I know what econometric forecasting is, at least in general. Qualitative techniques is my answer on this one. D.
And I
Was that
think you,
general consensus? Consensus?
yeah, for the most part, there's a couple C's, some D's, but I think you hit it right on the mark. You know, when you don't have that quantitative data, all the numbers to back up what you're, planning to do, qualitative is the next best data to go to. So I think that was
Yeah.
the key is understanding that piece of it.
Yes, so the key is in answering this question correctly is that you're familiar with the most two general forms of data used in forecasting or analysis of something as qualitative and quantitative. Okay, let's go on to 6. Most products and services enter a period of decline. Not everything runs great for all time. Unless compelling reasons prevail, continuing a declining product or service is costly because. So let's look at an answer. Continuing a declining product or service is costly. And the most general, that why is it costly to run something that's not doing well? Increased turnover of personnel will occur. Well, that may be true. You know, if something's in decline, you may have increased personnel, but I don't think that that is the best answer and why it's costly. Like the main reason why it's costly, employee turnover. Employee turnover is definitely costly, but no, I'm not thinking that's the best answer for this. Continuation will set an undesirable precedent concerned with maintaining the status quo. Ugh. Maybe it's getting long in the session here. I'm going to get my brain to work here. So continuation, it's talking about you're setting up undesirable precedent, maintaining the status quo. Well, I think that, maintaining the status quo, that's kind of talking about the question, it's talking about if your product or service is in decline and you continue it, you are continuing the status quo without looking at something. If it's not going well, you're just doing it to do it. So undesirable precedent. You don't want to set undesirable precedents, but is that the best answer? I don't. And the most costly, is that the reason why it's most costly? No, I don't think B is right. The program will consume a disproportionate amount of management time and delay the search for a replacement. Well, oftentimes, I'm thinking that this is a possibility, a good possibility. Costs, you're talking about costs. And when something's in decline, often you throw more resources into it to turn it around. And so instead of, and trying to save it or salvage it, and then while you're putting in all those resources to save or salvage it, you're taking away those resources for replacing it, because it is in decline. Maybe the marketplace changed. Maybe a lot of things can contribute to the decline of a product or a service. So I'm liking C, but I'm going to go to D and make sure that C, in my opinion, is the best answer pertaining to the costs of a declining product or service. The organization will be perceived as being insensitive to the marketplace. I think you're being insensitive to the marketplace if you try to continue a service that's in decline, and usually it's in decline because the market is no longer wanting it or needing it. But is that the reason? And is that for costs? Like is that the main reason why maintaining a declining product is most costly? And I don't think that is. That's costly. I'm thinking finance, I'm thinking money, resources, not just like a bad thing. Something's costly, it's bad. So I'm going with C as the best answer. There you go. Was the consensus? Was my mind tracking with most of our participants this morning, Ryan?
It was another combination between C and D. I think that was where people were kind
I
of
think it's the D is a cost, but it's like a reputational cost, not a financial. And again, how you interpret these questions, that's the challenge, because when I think of costs, and I think that this question was also interpreting costs about like resources, money, that type of cost, not like a cost to, which D is perception. It's like a reputational cost in among their customers. So true, but not the same cost that I think that the question is referring to. Okay, let's go on to 7. It's 11:24. I've got to.
I think we got time for maybe one or two
Yeah,
more.
2 more. I'm sorry, I'm taking too much time.
No worries.
Before submitting a business plan for a new clinical service line to the governing body, the plan should be developed by. So who is working on your new clinical service line plans? Recommendations from the Finance Committee on the basis of its estimates of income for the budget year. Well, a business plan includes much more than just finances, so I'm eliminating A right now. Not the best answer. The heads of profit centers considering each center's anticipated revenues and expenses with the CEO putting it all together. Well, to me, that's eliminates this, because your business plans for service lines are not put together by your CEO. So B, I'm eliminating. C, key executives, after receiving recommendations from heads of operating divisions and key physician leaders. That is looking like a very good answer, but let's look at D. The heads of operating divisions with the CEO putting it all together. Same reason why I eliminated B, I'm eliminating D. Your CEO is not putting together your business plan for a new clinical service line. So I'm going with C, because it's involving senior leaders, department heads, and physician leaders, and those are the people that you want involved in your business plan creation for service lines, clinical service lines. See, whoop whoop. Okay, let's go on to 8. Let's see if I can get through this one. Hospital systems have many customers of the aforementioned groups below, or aforementioned groups of people and organizations below, which is least likely, we're looking for the wrong answer, to be listed as a key target in a marketing plan. Marketing hat, who are our key targets in the community? Buyers, caregiver exchanges, state government, or patients? Well, I'm looking for the wrong answer. Who's really not my customer in a marketing plan? And my attention goes straight to state government. Typically, you can't change government. It's too bureaucratic. And marketing to a state government is not something that you typically do, and they're not usually considered a customer, although you may have partnerships and relationships. As far as a customer, I don't think that they are. So I'm going with C, because patients are definitely your customer, caregiver exchange, definitely your customer, and whoever is buying your product is definitely a customer. State government, not so much.
We have consensus in the chat as well.
Whoop, whoop. Okay. Do we want to stop with 3 minutes to go? Have we had enough of business sample questions? I don't know how many. I think it's 10
I
that
think
are
there's
left.
two more questions.
Yeah.
Um,
We have 3 minutes
3 minutes.
left.
Yeah. Do we want to kind of recap? Any
It's
final
up to you
thoughts?
guys.
Let's do the
They
other
do.
two.
We
All
get
right, let's
other
go
two.
for it.
Okay, let's muscle through. Environmental assessment or environment scanning is a formal surveillance review of the organization and its environment. All but one, so we're looking for the wrong answer, of the following should be taken into account by the planning committee or the planning unit that's doing this assessment or scanning. Community demography or demography, epidemiology, and the economy. All but the following. That's seeming to give probably all the right answers. So I don't think that that is what I'm going to go with. B, trends in physician availability. Well, you're doing an environment assessment, environment scanning. I think you are looking at trends. You want to know, you're looking at the overall environment. So B seems to be a correct or true answer. And we're looking for the wrong answer. Niche strategies. Niche is very limited, very very specific, pinpoint. And when you're doing environmental assessment or environment scanning, just those words are talking broadly. So I'm thinking C is a possible wrong answer. Patient community attitudes. Well, you're definitely looking at that. You're looking at patients, you're looking at the community, you're looking at physicians, you're looking at your community, demography, your epidemiology, the economy that's going on in your community. So, of all these answers, what is the most likely to not be taken into account in your scanning or assessment? It's C. That's I think, the best answer.
The way I approached this one was I said, okay, environmental scanning is looking at the environment outside the organization.
Yes.
So A, B, and D were all looking outside things.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good
Strategy is
point,
something you
Niche.
create
I was
internally.
looking at it broad versus specific.
Yeah, I mean, just different approaches, but
Yeah.
if you focus on that word environmental assessment or environmental scanning,
External.
so that's how I eliminated
Good.
the same ones, just different approach, but we ended up with the same answer.
Exactly. That's what's so tricky with this test. The last answer, let's do it. A healthcare facility can best meet its social and economic goals. Okay, we're looking for the best answer here. Developing a realistic and coordinated approach to long range planning. That's looking good for meeting social and economic goals. B, devoting most of its efforts to the development of efficient operational practices. Social and economic goals seem to be more external, and efficient operational practices seem to be more internal. So while that the organization might have goals over operational goals, this question is talking about its social and economic goals. So that's not answering the question. Having a good public relations program will focus the facility in the community. Which will focus the facility in the community? I mean, maybe, but we're looking for the best. And I don't think C is the best answer. It may contribute to meeting those, but I don't think it's the best. Providing all reimbursable services desired by the community. The word all is to me a red flag, and probably not a realistic goal when you put the word all in your goal. So I'm going back to A. 1131, is A the right answer?
It is, and we had the
Thumbs up.
consensus in the chat as well.
Okay. I think I'm done talking. My voice is telling me by coughing.
Right
My
on time.
tongue tied.
Any final
Okay.
thoughts from Rick, Mary?
Just don't be scared that the fact that they've got statistics listed as one of the things to know. They're not going to ask you to do major quantitative calculating and
Analysis.
stuff like that during the test.
Yeah. You're not doing your coefficient and all that stuff that you do in statistics. They're not going to ask. It's not a
Yeah.
it's not a that kind of test where you have to do formulas and everything.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mary.
see you next week. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.